grant-funded project. They have received, the history department has received grant funding to support collecting those histories, to get a perspective that has not been represented well. And we are going to be interviewing people from various schools all over the state, or from areas, looking for people who graduated or attended schools before Brown versus Board of Education. And we're going to take those oral histories. The interviews can take up to 2 hours to get a full history of where people are coming from, where they were born, what their experience was. And we are going to take the unedited transcripts and video interviews and contribute those to the West Virginia History Collection at the West Virginia University Library.
Okay, that's one of the things that a lot of people want to know. Where will the information be going?
Yes. Those will be digitally submitted, and then researchers forever could come and access them.
Right.
From anybody can come and access those. Students will also, because they are journalism, edit some of those transcripts into just 2 to 3 minute, here's a story somebody told, so that we can say, here's this project, here are some excerpts of what people have said. That piece of it is the part where, it's not just exactly what somebody said, they would edit together. So in that situation, we would let the person who was interviewed see those edited pieces before we publish them anywhere.
Okay, yeah, because those people that do interviews, I know when I do interviews, I want a copy of the interview that I do, if possible.
Okay.
Now, is this something where they can get a copy of the edited interview if they would like to have it?
So they're going to be in a digital space, and what that means is when you're recording HD video, a 2-hour interview can be up to like 50 gigabytes of space. So in terms of sharing that with somebody, a CD or DVD wouldn't even be enough space necessarily. Typically, when we do those for archival purposes, you'd almost have to have a hard drive.
Okay.
However, we will be putting those on Google Drive, which is the cloud. We're essentially putting them there so that anybody can go access them. In which case, if you are the person who has been interviewed and we share the address with you, you could download that whole interview to your computer or to your hard drive, so you would have a copy of it.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, one of the concerns that one of my friends shared is, she said to me, well, John, we're on reparations now, and I have to get your view on this. We're dealing with reparations now really since June 19th. There's been a big flare in it because the Congress in D.C. had a hearing on it. Mm-hmm. So, statewide, from state to state, people are gathering information, and it's ironic that you come along right at that time. Mm-hmm. And real quickly, yeah. She told me that she voiced some concern about it, that I didn't get derailed, because the number one thing in her mind that we should have been pushing for is reparations. I tried to tell her that part of being able to get reparations is also being able to detail our history and our culture here in the state. But I'm working with you on this because we need some help in doing that. WVU has the facilities, mm-hmm. and she wanted to know whether or not you had any black students. And that would help if you did have black students to make our people feel more comfortable.
So I can just tell you the unfortunate nature of being in West Virginia is that because 98% of the state is white, the school has an underrepresented black population. But yes, there is a black student in this class that will be participating in it. There is also an exchange student who is not even from this country, and I think she's from Central America. And I believe we might have an Asian or Hispanic student, but otherwise, no, mostly it's white students, which is how West Virginia generally plays out. It's partly why we think it's so important that we make an effort to actually say this isn't the only perspective that's represented, because too often in this state it has been for exactly that reason.
Well, now you do know that we do have black colleges throughout the state. We have West
I do
Virginia
know.
State and we have Bluefield State.
Yes.
This is the first time I've mentioned this to you, but I might suggest that you do bring somebody black on to be able to assist you with it, because first up, right off the top, I think I remember telling you that for the most part there is suspicion of Caucasians coming in and documenting the history.
Sure.
And I can give you one quick example of that right here at home with Armand and Galia, with real quickly, with what now Connie Rice did. Have you seen this book?
You told me about it. I have not seen it.
So you should know about it, right? She did the research for this. It's actually a good book. I found it very informative. She dropped some names that I didn't know about, and some of the names she dropped was Senator Waitman T. Willie and George Dorsey, of which she identified both of these people as paternalistic slaveholders. And I took issue with that. While supporting the book and the work that she did, I took issue with the fact that I think most black people would take issue with the fact of that she alluded to paternalistic slavery. And I reject that. While accepting her book as being documentary work, I reject that, and that's one of the reasons why I think it's important that...
You reject that she mentioned them in the book, you mean?
Well, I reject that she referred to Waitman T. Willie and George Dorsey as paternalistic slaveholders. Now, from her perspective, there may be such a thing as paternalistic slaveholders.
Oh,
because I happened to see Bobby Seale years ago at Fremont State, and he made the statement that in his generation, they were teaching that black people like slavery. They stood out on the stoop and they played the banjo, and it was once they got into black studies, it was part of the major reason black studies came across is because most of the white teachers were teaching, they were covering for slavery. Yeah. And this is one of the concerns that some of the people have, is that there would be covers, you know what I mean?
And so one of the things about this project is we are not taking these interviews and doing anything with them besides, here was the interview, we recorded it, it goes into the archives. Right. We're not writing a book with it. We're not synthesizing all of them and putting them together into any kind of history. We're not doing that. This is literally, you share your experience, we put it in the archives. Okay. There is no expectation that we would draw any conclusions from that or interpret it in any way other than that it's recorded and we've now submitted it. The only place where that comes into play is where we might edit it to a 2 to 3 minute excerpt so that we could actually promote the project. Now, again, if those are good enough, then the students have to, part of this is that the students learn some skills in storytelling, right. But if they're good enough, they would also be shared with the person who was interviewed, right. And they would be okayed. We would have them say, yes, it's okay I agree that that's a faithful representation of what I said. Right. Before we would ever put it out in public.
Okay. That's the question I want to get across. Yeah. People are concerned about hidden agendas.
We have no intention of doing anything with these interviews except putting them in the archive in the library.
And that's one of the reasons why I had to interview you and
Absolutely.
Get this on the record.
Absolutely.
Because these were legitimate dissents, because there's a history of it.
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. And I understand that concern, and I would just say the other thing for students, the value of this project for me as a journalist for students is that journalists, as much as it is possible, and we know that it's never possible to be entirely objective, nobody is, just because of their experiences, but they actually have to be able to interview people if they're going to be any good at their craft, at their vocation. They have to be able to interview people with an intent to learn from them, not to bring to the table their own experiences. Okay. That's right. So that's actually part of the learning in the class. That's part of the point of the class, actually.
Okay. Now, 2 points.
Yep.
Okay. You asked for assistance in one, detailing the African American experience in the segregated school systems, and 2, you were seeking African American women that had experienced the regional jail and prison system.
That's a separate project,
okay.
Right?
Two different projects.
Two different projects. The second project, which is about incarceration in this state. We have a grant-funded project, not with the history department. This one is entirely journalism and and strategic communications, which is public relations and advertising. Basically, we have a 2-year grant with the University of Oklahoma to actually raise public awareness on the problem of mass incarceration. Oklahoma and West Virginia are 2 of the leading states in the nation with incarcerating women, which the incarceration of women, the numbers are growing at a much more rapid rate than even the incarceration of men. It's not that there are more women incarcerated, it's that the numbers are growing more rapidly. Okay. And so we are studying that problem. We're studying what the cost is to our community to be incarcerating women in the thousands in jails and in prisons. The cost to children, the cost to just financial cost, the cost to the social fabric.
You say we are studying, who
the University of Oklahoma, the 2 journalism schools, West Virginia University and University of Oklahoma.
In focusing
they are studying it in their state, we are studying it in our state, looking at what has this cost us and why is that rate growing at such such crazy numbers.
And you looked and you've seen the African American population of women within this state specifically.
Inside of that, we can say that per capita, it disproportionately affects black people. That,
right.
Yes, there are more white women in prison, but based on representation of the actual numbers,
yeah,
right. Black people are disproportionately in prison or jail more than white people.
I'm really concerned about that myself because the woman in our community, or any community, right? She's the mother of the children.
Yes.
She goes to jail, that disrupts the family and disrupts the children terribly so.
So the numbers are something like over 80% of women who go to jail and prison are the primary care providers of children.
So what happens then after the children end up in foster care?
Right, which we've been studying, we've studied that for the last, I personally have studied that for the last 5 years, where the numbers of children in foster care have grown by more than 100% in 3 years. And we, last year, said there's a child welfare crisis in this state because we don't have enough families to put these kids in.
Right.
So ultimately, what we're talking about is that just the social fabric of this state will not look the same in 10 years. Like, families will look different, everything will look different as a result of this.
Right. Now in my community, we refer to those things, I refer to them as gentrification markers, where we, where we look at this and we say, well, they're locking up black women. That's a gentrification marker. We look at that as a gentrification marker.
And I do think that's a piece of it, absolutely. They're locking up addicts, is what we
right.
What we can say is that it's a war. The war on drugs has actually been, which by the way, addiction is considered a mental health issue now by the American Medical Association. So whether or not locking people up is the answer is, as a journalist, again, I'm not supposed to take a position on this. I'm just supposed to say here are the facts. I certainly have my opinion about this, and I feel really passionately about it because I'm a native West Virginian.
Right.
And I look around and see what it's doing to the students I teach. I can see that. I can see the difference in their ability to deal with disappointment, and their ability to actually study, and their ability to work. Yeah, I feel like in the 10 years that I've been here, I have seen a distinct difference in just in the population of students we get here.
In the student population,
Yep.
you've seen a fluctuating change over.
Yeah, since I came to work here, I would say it has impacted everything.
Are you talking about the opium epidemic in specific?
I'm talking about, just our approach
to dealing with
incarcerating addicts. I think there was a study last year that came out that said 1 in 10 West Virginians has an incarcerated parent.
Yeah.
1 in 10. And you just, the trauma that comes from that, when people see their parents locked up, the growing up in an unstable environment like that, just all of those things, they will change the culture, the face of how we live as a community. That's right.
Last question is partially a comment. I told you about there's a report that was put out in 2011.
Yep.
I always tell people about this legacy of inequality.
Okay.
Are you familiar with it? It's put out, well, it's actually put out in 2010.
Maybe.
It's online.
Okay.
American Friends Service in conjunction with African American churches in Charleston, they put this report out. It details racial and economic disparities directly.
Yeah.
And I'll say this. People say to me, John, you know you're supposed to be working with black people. This is a report right here. If it hadn't been for the American Friends Service working in conjunction with African American churches, we wouldn't have got these statistics out. Right. So, you know, for those people that tell me, well, John, you're getting derailed here, you're working with white people, and you should be sticking just specifically with our people, right? I want to tell them that I'm at a stage in my life that it's necessary for us to engage outside of our own communities, right, so we can get this thing corrected and put people on notice. And when I say put people on notice, put people on notice that the disparities are there, and also embolden our own people to demand justice. And so
I will say that the incarceration project that we are working with the American Friends Committee Society, with Lyda Shepherd and her team of people who she has recruited a number of formerly incarcerated people to actually work for justice reform in this state, and we are documenting some of that process.
I've seen some of the work that she's doing. I like that, but again, I want to see our own people organize and put forth an agenda where that would be able to collectively benefit them. So that's one of the reasons why, once again, in closing this, I would say that it's very important for you to find an African American journalist that's competent to come on with you, because it gives an air of authenticity. Okay, not sure that would be me, but you got one someplace, and I think you should be able to find one and go over the information that you collect with that person. So you might want to take that under advisement.
Okay.
Okay, and we're going to end this. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.